into the top end of the engine, otherwise it gets sucked into the engine and just clogs up, and you can have quite a disastrous effect with that. So use 4-strokes on mowers, which tend not to be upside down. Now, it's not only the oil, it's also the carburettor, because of course you've got a float in there, and if you get the angle of the carburettor wrong, you'll either starve the engine, and that's what happened in Spitfires. Spitfires used to starve when they were in steeply banked turns, or if they went upside down. Certainly the first ones did. Whereas the old Messerschmitts had fuel injection, and they didn't starve, so they could get away, or they could attack better. But on my I think it is fairly critical on these things. The boat doesn't really go a long way on the engine. Sort of upside down or anything like that. Hopefully not, anyway. And I think small variations in the angle isn't the problem. I think the fact is that because when I first started, it started perfectly and ran okay for about 5 minutes, and then it started to make some funny noises, and it was kind of sounded like a 2-stroke. It was missing every occasion, and then I think that was just the oil burning and then choking up the plug. And but put it this way: as soon as I put the leg to the proper angle again, I cleaned the plug out, dried it off, and then ran out of gas because I was trying to clean the plug on the gas stove, and then the gas ran out, which didn't please the Memsar because she couldn't have a cup of tea. And at that point, I said, "Well, I'll just get the engine going, and then we'll pack up, and we'll go back, and we'll have breakfast at home instead of." Having to get up, we'd have got up and had one in the cafe, I suppose. But we do like our cup of tea when we first wake up. Edwina's not a very fast waker-upper. So, yeah. Did you think about the carburettor, Dave, on the 4-stroke? It's very critical on the angle of that. M0 SPZ MW0 GYV.
Yeah, Roger. Well, I've driven a 4-stroke engine up Porlock Hill, and it didn't sketch start. I still don't appreciate quite why they're so sensitive. I mean, you see, I suppose fishing boats and things, the big boats, fishing boats. I suppose they're all diesel, so maybe that's part of the problem. The fact that it's a conventional sort of petrol-driven engine, Peter. But I still don't understand why it needs to be level in order to run properly. Because 4-stroke engines, as I say, Porlock Hill. What is that? I think that's about 25 degrees up, isn't it, or more? And cars go up and down that all day. So I don't think that's necessarily the answer. But anyhow, I'll leave you with it. It's not something that I've got any expertise in, other than sort of just thinking that it can't be that sensitive in a boat that's rocking and rolling. You've got to have an engine that will work at significantly different angles from horizontal. As regards to the VXO and dangling all bits out, Frank, yeah, you'll be able to tune it, Frank, like a theremin. You'll be able to wave your hand backwards and forwards in front of it in order to change frequency, Frank. G0GSR in the group, M0 SPZ.
Now that would be interesting, wouldn't it? You remember that processor that Dad sent me where I could alter the pitch of my voice? It would sound just like that, wouldn't it? I could just wave at it and make silly patterns with my hand and move up and down the band. Well, I'm not trying to get a huge coverage out of it, Peter. And like I said before, the amount of pulling you can get from a crystal very much depends on the crystal itself. I used to have some that would pull quite a long way. In fact, I had some really good crystals that would just keep going and going and going. You could pull them, many, many kilohertz away from the fundamental, but they just got more and more unstable because the oscillator turned more into a VFO than a crystal oscillator, the further you pull it. But it was very successful, so I'm going to have a go and see what I can get out of it. And like you say, I'll just build the oscillator first and play with that and see how far we can pull it, etc., and see what frequency it's on. And I certainly won't put that 100 microfarad capacitor in it. But I think I can sort of see what's happening with your engine. Because it's a horizontal engine, the sump isn't at the bottom of the engine like it is in a car, is it? So it would be a lot more sensitive to the angle at which the engine is orientated at horizontally, and there must be a limit over which it will work, and I think you've obviously found that you just exceeded it by a small amount, Peter, and realised not to do it again. And to push what you want to do with M0SPZ from G0GSR.
Yeah, that last sentence was very apt. Don't do it again. So, but it was okay when the engine was running fast. So I don't know whether that was, well, first of all, the engine, obviously, when it's running fast, it's hotter inside and it's burning the oil. But also, I think the front of the boat does get pushed up, well, quite substantially, really. It will do about, well, it'll do about 5 knots with this. It's only a 4 horsepower motor, for goodness sake. The boat weighs nearly 2 tons. Well, with me on board, it certainly does. And I think it is surprisingly critical. You just have to accept it's surprisingly critical. I've just got the manual out for it, and there's big warnings about not laying the motor down. You mustn't lay it down the way you think you should. You have to lay it down in either keep it upright, in which case the oil sits in the bottom of the sump, or you lay it down on one particular side. Now, there are other engines. I think Suzuki make them, much more expensive, and they've got what's essentially a dry sump. So they've got a system to keep the oil in the bottom, and it doesn't matter which way you put that one down. But this is just a Mariner. Is it a Mariner or a Mercury? There's Mariner, Mercury, and Johnson. They're all the same, actually. But most of the engines are made in the Far East, but it's an American design. It's great, very simple engine, but it's jolly good. It works very well, really. And it was only when I went. I mean, the thing was that they were holding us up because there was some tug movement, and also some pretty big fishing boats wanted to come in, and they were faffing around. So we were put into the holding bay at the top of the marina, and as soon as I turned the engine down to tick over, it was very lumpy, and it's not right. It should just tick over nicely, and it didn't. So I didn't know what the hell was going on. You think, oh, I've got some bad fuel from Tesco's, or what have I done wrong, and stuff like that. And even then, I didn't remember that, an hour or two before, I changed the angle of the leg. It was only when I got back to the berth and I sort of sat and thought about it and thought, well, where's all that oil come from? Why is the plug carboned up? Because it shouldn't. Normally, on a petrol engine, you don't get, unless the plug is the wrong temperature, and it's the correct plug, and I got brand new ones. So I just thought, silly. So what have I done that was different to last week? Because it was okay last week, same petrol. So I thought, and then pulled the engine out, move there's a little lever that adjusts the angle of the leg. It's okay to tilt it. You can tilt the leg, further back and that's not a problem, because the head comes up, as it were, and the sump goes down. But if you tilt it the other way, it don't like it. It don't like it up it at all. And it certainly did make an horrible black mess around the plug. It was like a 2-stroke plug when it's oiled up. So that was the clue for me anyway. I also wondered if I'd actually managed to partially, I did. I flood the engine with some more extra fuel, because it was very, very wet in terms of, when I say wet, petrol, best smelter petrol. But changing the plug over to the clean one, it just was instantly fired into life. And then, but that would only last a short time until I put the leg properly again. So anyway, it's something to think about, isn't it? M0SPZ MW0GYV.
Yeah, Roger. Well, I'm still struggling to think about it, Peter. Does it say in the specifications or the operating manual the sort of conditions that it is operable at, and those angle? I know you spoke about not laying the engine down, but in terms of operating, when it's operating, does it say should not be operated for, more than such a number of degrees to horizontal or anything? I wonder if this spec actually says anything about it. Johnson Motors, yeah. Well, first of all, I remember my Uncle Hartley had a powerboat, and he used to bring it down to the river now where was it? Felmersham was the place, over the other side of Bedford. And we used to go water skiing, and that had a Johnson motor on the back, and an outboard motor, and And I remember my dad trying to get out on the water skis, and this boat, it was okay for pulling the kids, but the worst bit of pulling a water skier is when they're still in the water. The boat needs to be quite a powerful boat in order to overcome the resistance. Once they're up on the skis, you don't need quite as much power. But a quite uncle-hearted boat couldn't get my dad out of the water. It just wouldn't pull fast enough. Anyhow, about 2 weeks later, my uncle Hardy appeared with same boat, but with an engine on the back, an absolutely huge Johnson engine. And this thing would really, really go very, very fast up and down the river. You wouldn't be allowed to do it these days, of course. But, as it went past, everybody sitting by the bank got drenched with the in the wake. So that's my memories of Johnson outboard motors. But the other memory I've got of Johnson Motors is they're also a company that make very many millions and millions of tiny little motors. Johnson Motor Company, I went visiting them in mainland China, and also Hong Kong. They've got a base as well, and they make all these tiny little motors that used to go inside cameras and things for adjusting, maybe they still do, for adjusting apertures and winding the film on and various other things. So in every camera there used to be about 3 or 4 of these tiny little motors, and the Johnson Motor Company, along with Mabuchi, used to make them in their millions. G0GSR in the group M0SB.
Yeah, okay, G0GSR, that's interesting about the Johnson Motor Company. No idea about that. I've only ever seen them on the large outboard motors, but yeah, you say the motor technology inside cameras is quite amazing, isn't it? The size of these things, and a couple of cameras I've got, there are motors within the lenses themselves, which is absolutely amazing, and you can't really hear them working. They're totally silent. I don't know what the technology they use is. But I was just looking, when Peter mentioned 4 horsepower, I couldn't think of how much power 4 horsepower was in kilowatts. And I've had to just look it up. I had it in my head, it was 1 horsepower was 540 watts, but it's not, I was wrong, it's 746 watts. So it is a bit more powerful than my lawnmower, Peter. But my lawnmower is actually rated in kilowatts. It's rated at 2.2 kilowatts, so that's just over 1 and a bit horsepower, isn't it? So your boat is a bit more powerful than my lawnmower, which is quite reasonable, isn't it? But you mentioned being controlled and being held while there was some of the big boat movements. So how does that work, Peter? Is there sort of like an air traffic controller for the harbour that talks to you on the VHF radios and tells you what to do when you're coming and going? And do you have to get permission for takeoff? I'm W0GYB in the group from G0GSR.
You absolutely do. That's also for security, of course. But it's all controlled by a channel 14, we call it. Hang on, I should look it up on my. I use my naughty. I'm being very naughty. I use my handheld, my VHF transceivers, and it's on there. So it's on my thing. It's on memory number 114 because it's channel 14. The VHF people, they don't know. They don't know what the frequencies are. But yeah, I listen to them all the time. And yeah, it's this particular engine. It's a single-cylinder jobby. It's quite nicely made, to be honest. It's quite neat. It's quite light. I wanted a lightweight motor because I take it in and out. So it's got a well in the back of the boat, and you've put it into the well, and so it doesn't stick on the back of the boat. But when we go home, we always put it in the locker. And when I used to race or do the regattas, we used to put it in the well, go outside, put it back in the locker, put the plug in the bottom to make the bottom all nice and smooth, go do the race, in the race, put the motor back in, go back into the marina, go to your berth, and then take it back out, put it in the locker again. So lots of work. And that was another reason to change to the smaller 4 horsepower. I used to have an 8 horsepower engine. The boat didn't go any faster though. It would just use a lot more fuel. It would do 6 knots through the water. To make the boat plane, you need, I calculate, about 20 horsepower. So this particular one, same capacity but different carburetors and different price, of course. You can get 4, 5 or 6 horsepower And as I say, it's supposedly made by 3 manufacturers, but it's exactly all the same, 1 different colours. But it does about 5.5 knots with the 4 horsepower motor. And the 5 horsepower motor, if you look at the specs, the only difference is that it generates its power at a higher RPM. And the boat wouldn't go any faster, so what was the point of paying more for what was essentially the same engine without a restrictor in the carburettor? It's got a bigger bore carburettor. And Dave, you hit the nail on the head. It is actually quite critical, the angle. There's lots of warnings. Do not lay the engine down except this particular way. Do not transport it, this way down. Always transport it. And it's got a big label on the side as well, which is a warning. Lay the engine on this side, which is strange in a way, because it's the tiller handle. They've got tiller handles on them with a throttle on it and stuff. That is underneath when you lay the engine down, and you think you'd put it down a different way. It does restrict how you can put it in your boot, and it restricts how you can store it in the locker in the boat. But it's quite a big locker; it goes in easy. But there are warnings within I've been reading the instructions fairly briefly, having an overview, and it does warn you about the angle of dangle. So clearly, it's much more critical than I thought. And I've been a good boy. When I serviced the engine this year, I did put lots of oil in it, so it was up to the max. And presumably, if I hadn't have done that, if I'd have put less oil in the engine, it would have been okay. But I'd rather have found it now because it's something that I won't do in the future, as you recommend. M0SPZ from MW0GYV.
Yeah, Roger. Yeah, but that's not when it's operating, Peter. Does it give you a specification of the angle when it's operating, Craig?
I haven't come across that yet. Oh, and I didn't really finish. I finished on this topic. There's a couple of jet skis in. They've taken over a corner berth where the boats can't get into, and they did a deal. So they've got a couple of jet skis in there now. Suzuki, 4 cylinders, about 1,000 cc's or more, 100 horsepower. And these are little jet skis weighing about 25 kilos. And they make an awful lot of wash. It's like pulling your friend's dad through the water. Your uncle's, was it your uncle? Through the water, and they make an awful lot of wash and waves as they go out the marina. As soon as they go outside, they up on the plane, and the wash disappears. Back to you, Dave.
Yeah, Roger. Yeah, they look like lots of fun, don't they? If I was a few years younger, I might hire one of those and have a play around. I quite like messing about on water. I'm quite a good swimmer, or I used to be, and always used to spend a lot of my summer times submerged, as it were. Yes, well, the operating, I can understand how you must keep the thing at certain angles when it's not operating. You don't want to turn it upside down, etc., etc. But when it's operating, it must have a certain amount of leeway as regards to the angle at which it can operate on. Otherwise, it wouldn't be any good for in a boat. It would just, the smallest of swells would change the angle, and the engine would fail. Right, okay, well, I'm going to make a break now, make this my final. So thanks for joining me this morning. Remember that Frank, I'm not on tomorrow because I'm going for a checkup from the neck up at the dentist, and I should be back on Thursday. So cheerio to you and Peter and anybody that's listening on the web system. G0GSR in the group, M0SPZ, now off and clear, listening once round. Bye-bye.
Yeah, okay, Dave, G0GSR, written Wednesday, dentist on my pad now. So when I come in the shack in the morning and you're not calling CQ at 5 to 9, I shall look at the pad and I shall say, that reminds me. Yeah, I would imagine this motor business, it depends which axis the tilt is on, doesn't it? I would imagine that front to back, the one that Peter was adjusting, would be quite critical, but maybe side to side is less critical, because boats do move quite a bit side to side, don't they? But probably a little less up front to back. Not being a sailor, I don't really know what I'm talking about, just talking rubbish, aren't I? but 100 horsepower jet skis. Is that because they're so damned inefficient? I know they do go a hell of a belt, but do they need all that power because they're so flipping inefficient from the way that they work? I'm not really too sure. Anyway, okay, we'll leave it here. This is my final now, and go and put the kettle on and make a nice cup of coffee, etc. And I shall be around in the morning, if you're around, Peter. We'll have to see what develops then. MWT-UIV with MC-RSPZ from G0GSR.
Oh, well, that gives you a reason then to check all your components for the oscillator, and perhaps build that part, and we can see what you've got then. And we'll bore Dave's pants off. When Dave said about the criticality, I once had a fairly peppy Escort, and I gave it a service and filled it with oil, and I actually put too much oil in the thing, and when herring off to try it out, was living in Northumberland, went herring down to Wide Open near Newcastle, and then back up to Cramlington. There's a very long sweeping bend coming off the A1 to turn off onto the road into Cramlington, past the Holiday Inn. I remember it well. As I went herring around there, suddenly great clouds of blue smoke came out the back end of the Escort, and it was pinking like mad. And what it was, I'd overfilled the sump, and the oil sort of washed up into the engine, and it didn't like it up it. So that's why they put dry sumps on racing cars. They don't use wet sumps. Wet sumps are very, very squiffy on 4-strokes. Yeah, I'll be on tomorrow, Frank. So I'll wait for you to call, or I might even call you. You never know. And I don't know that I'm going to be doing anything on the radio today, on the little radio, Pixie in. I might leave that until you've done your bit, and then be a follower on it. I really ought to mow the lawn and do some work in the garden. And I've got to sort out the gas and the bits and pieces for the next trip. So it's been an enjoyable chat anyway. Have fun, MW0GYV.
Yeah, okay, Peter. I thought you'd have probably got the gas from the marine. Couldn't you just take it to the shop there and get a new gas bottle?
I'm too tight. I've got a spare one in the cellar, Frank. I only took one with me. It's camping gas. I don't know if they do camping. They do Calagas, and they do some odd one, but I don't know if they do camping gas. Or if you can even buy it anymore. I've had it for years.
I was expecting it to be quite a big bottle rather than one of these. It's a throwaway canister, is it?
No, it's about, I forget what the kilogramage is. They measure the kilograms in the gas. The cylinder's about 6 inches tall and about the same diameter, I suppose. Or maybe it's 8 inches tall, I don't know. Blue one.
Yeah, but it's a reusable cylinder, not a throwaway one.
Yeah, it's a reusable one.
Yeah, okay. I suppose it must be cheaper. Once you get away from the marina, it'll be cheaper, won't it? Anyway, okay, Peter, well, maybe on tomorrow. Well, I will be on tomorrow, and hopefully speak to you. And I maybe do a little bit on this thing today. I'm not really too sure. At least I'm going to check the components anyway. But like you've got the grass to cut, and you've got to do it before this weather's coming in, haven't you? I think we're going to get some rain a bit later on in the week, so I have to do it today while I can. But cheers for now, Peter, from G0GSR.
That was another reason we decided to come back, Frank. It was extremely windy down at the marina, and it was getting worse as we left. So we're down here. It's very calm. It's quite calm today. So have fun anyway, Frank. And yeah, I shall look forward to hearing your results.
Yeah, okay, Peter. I know it was quite windy here yesterday, but it doesn't seem to be today. Anyway, cheers for now, and I should be around tomorrow from G0GSR.
Okay, bye-bye.